Yeah.
That's the whole point. They want to be treated as royals. And that is the one thing they were told you can't do. You can't be inside or outside, just choose. So I think if Ravik decided to give them a royal protection, that would be a terrible, terrible mistake.
Harry, if he really felt the way he says he felt about his family, that this is this older institution, he compares his father and brother's life to being in jail or trapped in a cage when he talked to Oprah Winfrey, then why would you set your child up for that by insisting they have a title?
Exactly, exactly.
Everyone just looked at each other with utter disgust. The words expressed to my source were, "We can't say too much, but Meghan was incapable of fitting in with anyone because she couldn't cope with following simple rules, as she felt her way was better."
He didn't have the balls to say, "No, I will not let you speak about my family that way, no matter how mad I am." And I think a lot of people see that and have that value of like, I don't really care what personal drama or fighting is going on. I still wouldn't want someone deliberately trying to ruin my brother or sister or parents' life or reputation or image in the public eye.
And Harry's presence in Britain is always a problem. That's the issue. Harry and Meghan and Harry are dynamite together.
Some commentators have argued that one question has never been directly asked to Prince Harry in major interviews: whether he regrets his decisions. They point out that this question was not raised in high-profile appearances such as interviews with Oprah or in Netflix-related content. .it is also being reported in commentary that, ahead of his planned visit to Birmingham, discussions around security arrangements are still ongoing and not fully resolved. Some sources claim that there has been little significant change in his situation despite public attention and speculation. Others describe the surrounding media narrative as exaggerated or uncertain, suggesting that much of what is being said is based on opinion and speculation rather than confirmed developments.
The fact they don't give interviews to any other than people who they cultivate and control if they can, nobody ever asks them, do you regret having lied to Oprah Winfrey? Do you regret having lied on Netflix? And all the magazine interviews, don't you see what a terrible mistake you've made? And are you prepared to apologize? That, I think, is what we're waiting to hear.
Some reports and commentary have clarified that Prince Harry's upcoming UK visit is not for the main Invictus Games themselves, which are scheduled for Birmingham in 2027, but rather for a one-year-to-go promotional event planned for July. According to these accounts, much of the discussion surrounding the visit has focused on security arrangements, particularly whether armed police protection will be provided. Some media outlets have suggested that a resolution is close or that outcomes are already decided, while other commentary argues that these claims are premature and based on speculation rather than confirmed decisions. Overall, the situation remains subject to ongoing discussion between relevant parties, and the public narrative around it varies depending on the source and interpretation.
Held on, some source whispered to a Sunday paper.
So here's where the media headlines are getting really squirrely. This is not a win for Harry. This is not a reversal of his clear, decisive legal defeats. It is simply a reassessment for security that has been conducted for the first time in about 5 years.
According to some commentary around the issue, a key detail that did not make most headlines is that a spokesperson for the Sussexes reportedly said there has been no change to their security situation, as far as they are aware. This has been interpreted by some commentators as a contradiction to media reports suggesting that a major security decision, or win, has already been secured. Others, however, argue that such statements reflect only what is officially confirmed at a given time, and that negotiations or decisions can still be ongoing behind the scenes. Because of that, different outlets are presenting the situation in different ways, some framing it as settled, while others describe it as still unresolved and developing.
So, to be a little bit more specific and clear here, Harry lost his legal challenges to the process used by Ravik. The press is framing the current situation as a win, which is problematic, only because he is ultimately achieving his goal of getting police protection, but he is going about it through administrative channels rather than the court.
Some commentary suggests that the win narrative around security may be overstated, arguing that the actual situation has not significantly changed. It is also noted that Prince Harry can already receive armed police protection during certain UK visits if appropriate notice is given and if a risk assessment justifies it. From this perspective, the core arrangements are not new, and the key issue remains how security decisions are assessed and applied on a case-by-case basis.
Contacted the Ravik offices the way it is right now, 28 days notice, itinerary, we determine on a case-by-case basis exactly what you need. If the man says, my wife and children will be accompanying me, don't you believe that Ravik would be like, yes, you will have armed guards?
Some commentators argue that Prince Harry's position is that he would prefer a higher, more automatic level of security in the UK, similar to what working royals receive, rather than arrangements decided on a case-by-case basis. From that perspective, they see the dispute as rooted in the difference between official royal duties and private life after stepping back from those roles. However, this remains a contested interpretation. Officially, security decisions for visiting members of the royal family are generally described as being based on risk assessments rather than fixed entitlements, and those assessments can change depending on circumstances. The idea of wider family reconciliation is also often discussed in media commentary, but the actual private intentions of the individuals involved are not publicly confirmed. As a result, much of this narrative is based on speculation, interpretation, and competing viewpoints rather than verifiable statements from all parties.
Of course she uses the children to control Harry like divorced parents often do. She has Harry terrified that if the kids met their relatives, they would like them or love them or want to go back. This lone stalker, which is kind of funny that this is the reason why this has been reinstated. He must be very scared of this lady. It's very common for famous people and public figures to deal with a stalker occasionally, and this seems to be the only justification to really reconsider and approve automatic protection for Harry.
Some commentary around the case has referred to a reported incident involving an alleged stalker during a UK charity visit, which was said to have brought someone unusually close to Prince Harry on more than one occasion. However, the details and significance of this incident have been interpreted differently across sources. Supporters of stronger security arrangements cite it as evidence of ongoing risk concerns, while critics argue that such incidents are sometimes presented in a way that strengthens legal or public arguments about protection levels. As with many aspects of this broader discussion, there is disagreement over how central or decisive this example is, and it remains part of a wider, contested debate about security arrangements rather than a single confirmed basis for all claims.
And the only other time he's ever said he was in danger was, I think...
A fan.
A fan, yes.
A fan.
Exactly. So, you know...
It has pictures of him and Meghan on the internet, yeah.
There's only a motive if he promotes himself.
That's the story that was meant to prove he's in real danger. You weren't buying it, and you said so loudly. The claim that spread fastest was that this stalker wasn't a stalker at all. She was part of the Sussex fan crowd, someone they'd reportedly already posed for photos with, a familiar face.
Do I personally think that he's blowing this a little bit out of proportion? Yes, I certainly do. Like I said, I get stalkers can be deeply unpleasant for famous people to deal with, but she didn't have any weapons, she didn't have any crazed ideations, it doesn't look like the threat is ongoing. However, Harry was sure to publicize these incidents. He leaked it to the press that this happened twice and the extent to which this woman got close to him, and lots of details were made public about it from Harry's team.
And
one viewer put it perfectly, and hundreds nodded along. About as real as that New York car chase. And remember, the person who called that car chase smoke and mirrors wasn't some anonymous account. He was a seasoned investigative journalist who picked it apart piece by piece. So the obvious question just sits there. If she was genuinely dangerous, why was she never charged?
The way that is calculated is there a threat?
Right.
And there's no threat to Meghan or her children. They've never shown a threat. The only threat has been that they'll be photographed by paparazzi, which is, of course, what they want.
Well, which is what Meghan does 24 hours a day in the house.
Exactly. and summons people to spot her at a restaurant or somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think, on the contrary, I think they won't allow them to abuse the system.
And where was the deadly threat the day Harry reportedly wandered door to door in the UK, lost looking for a friend, and not one person noticed or cared? You can't be too dangerous to walk the street one week and invisible the next. Now here's where it gets genuinely complicated, and I'll be straight with you because the picture has shifted. A masked man with a crowbar was recently caught near Sandringham, tied to the mess around Andrew. That one's real, and it's made even some of Harry's critics admit a way has to be found to keep him safe when he visits. So the danger talk isn't all theater anymore.
Be a motive if he promotes himself. And after all, he's the man who said he killed 25 Taliban, which he didn't have to do. He's the man who boasted he killed. He doesn't know if it was 25 or 30 and how many innocents died too. So what does he want? He brings it on himself and then says, now protect me.
But notice the move. The scary, credible incident gets folded in right next to the flimsy one, and suddenly the whole package looks airtight. That blurring does a lot of work, and it sets up the part that makes Harry look worst of all, that there's only a motive if he promotes himself. And after all, he's the man who said he killed 25 Taliban, which he didn't have to say. He's the man who claimed he killed, though he doesn't even know if it was 25 or 30, or how many died. So what does he want? Here's what the cheerleading coverage will not say out loud. This was never a win. And once you see why, you can't unsee it. Rewind. Early 2020, they quit. They lose automatic protection and get moved to a case-by-case system. Give notice, get assessed, get security if the threat earns it. Harry couldn't stand it, so he sued, claiming the process was unlawful and rigged against him. He lost. He appealed. He lost again. Last spring, the road ran out.
And he lost that case, he appealed it, and he lost the appeal in spring 2025, leaving him with no other further legal action possible to take. Like, that was the full end of the story. He cannot sue again, basically. And it's worth noting at this point that the threats that Harry and his family potentially or allegedly face are nowhere near as serious or constant as the working royals, King Charles, the monarch, Prince William, and his family, and all the direct heirs, for very obvious reasons.
Now
the part that should stop you cold. The entire time, Harry could have simply asked for a fresh review every single year through the ordinary channel like any other public figure. He didn't. And the reason is almost too perfect to be true. You can't beg the system to assess you while you're suing to prove that same system is illegal. It undermines your own case.
And he lost that case, he appealed it, and he lost the appeal in spring 2025, leaving him with no other further legal action possible to take. Like, that was the full end of the story. He cannot sue again, basically. And it's worth noting at this point that the threats that Harry and his family potentially or allegedly face are nowhere near as serious or constant as the working royals, King Charles, the monarch, Prince William, and his family, and all the direct heirs, for very obvious reasons.
Now,
his lawyers needed him swinging at the policy, not quietly using it. So picture it. For years, he stood in front of cameras, wounded and bitter, complaining he hadn't been reassessed, painting the palace as the villain who froze him out. When the truth is, he chose not to ask. He sat on it so it wouldn't wreck his lawsuit. And now, if a review finally says he qualifies, that doesn't prove he was right all along. It proves the opposite. It proves there was never any bias. The system treated him fairly the second he actually used it the proper way. All that money, all that grievance, all that they're out to get him.
His primary goal at that time was a judicial review because he wanted the public to see, or he wanted to be validated in his feelings that it was an unlawful and procedurally unfair decision. Requesting a fresh review while simultaneously suing to prove the first review was illegal would have been legally contradictory. His team focused on overturning the 2020 policy entirely rather than asking to be evaluated under that policy each year.
And he could have had this quietly years ago. You knew that before the papers did.
Ultimately, from my perspective, this just proves that Ravik and the Home Office were never operating in a biased way. It only proves Harry wrong and shows that had he not invested all that time and expense in his petty, silly, ridiculous, entitled legal battles, he could have had this stuff reassessed every single year and may have had this very thing occur, this very same outcome, much, much earlier.
Set the security drama aside for a moment, because this is the one that really set people off. Meghan reportedly posted a photo of a close friend's newborn, with the baby's face shown clearly, and added a caption joking, "You all know I love a red head," followed by a laughing emoji. The post quickly sparked online backlash, with some viewers interpreting it as an inappropriate joke tied to her husband and reading far more into the wording than others thought was intended. It became another example of how quickly personal, seemingly light moments get pulled into wider public controversy and speculation.
I think the real interest is how low can they go and when will it all explode or implode?
Yeah.
And that's really why I'm fascinated by it, because I think that, the manipulation of the media by them,
Yes.
by the constant drip of we've got to be recognized, we want people to write about us, but we don't want it to be our privacy to be invaded, is just priceless. And they are the victims of their own dishonesty. That is what is so fascinating.
Now,
You're essentially pushing a very loaded interpretation of an online controversy, but it's worth separating a few things that often get blurred together in these kinds of narratives. First, the paternity joke framing is an interpretation, not a confirmed intent. Social media captions, especially sarcastic or joking ones, often get read in multiple, conflicting ways depending on the audience. Without clear context from the person who posted it, it's easy for meaning to get amplified into something more accusatory than what was actually intended. Second, the claim about hypocrisy, protecting children online versus sharing a friend's baby photo, mixes two different situations. Many public figures do talk about child privacy in the context of their own children or long-term safety concerns, but that doesn't always translate into a strict rule about never sharing any image involving children, especially if it's a friend's post or shared with consent. People are inconsistent online all the time without it necessarily pointing to a coordinated script. Finally, the part about the friend's past loss is especially sensitive. That kind of detail tends to circulate in online commentary, but it's also exactly where speculation can become unfair or hurtful if it isn't clearly verified and relevant to the actual post in question. So what you're seeing here is less a clean case of hypocrisy and more a typical internet escalation loop. A joke, interpretation, moral framing, broader character judgment. This segment is leaning heavily on interpretation and assumes intent that isn't actually established in the text of the post itself. A few things to separate clearly. First, the idea that someone twisted a newborn photo into a joke about affairs is a reading of the caption, not a confirmed meaning. Online captions, especially short, joking ones, can easily be overinterpreted when people already expect controversy. Without explicit statements from the person who posted it, you can't reliably treat that interpretation as fact. Second, the claim that it's extraordinary, or letting slip affair rumors, assumes she was actively referencing or validating rumors. In reality, what usually happens in cases like this is the opposite. Ambiguity gets filled in by public speculation, and then the speculation is treated as if it was part of the original intent. Third, the idea that no one was thinking about whose baby it was is also not something you can really establish. Online audiences don't move as a single mind. Different people interpret the same post in completely different ways at the same time. What's really happening here is a familiar pattern in celebrity commentary. A light or ambiguous post gets reframed through the lens of existing narratives about the person, and then that reframing becomes the dominant story. That's less about what was actually said and more about how people choose to interpret it once the topic is already emotionally charged.
Here we have a woman who has ultimately been given scripts that have been written for her. She has gone to Geneva with the World Health Organization and absolutely talked about things she does not know about. And she's not really bothered about it, Dan, is she? Because if this was a woman that was worried about children's faces being in the public domain, she would not let her friend put that picture out there. Now, yes, it was on Meghan's Instagram, but even if Kelly had said, I want you to do it, you would say, no, this is really something that I'm passionate about.
This section is blending several different claims, interpretations, and disputed narratives into a single hypocrisy argument, but a lot of it isn't actually established fact. First, the comparison between sharing a friend's baby photo and hiding her own children assumes a contradiction, but those are separate decisions with different contexts. Many public figures choose not to publicly show their own children's faces for privacy reasons, while still appearing in other people's posts or sharing images involving children in different circumstances. That isn't automatically inconsistent unless there's a clear, stated rule being violated, which isn't demonstrated here. Second, the Father's Day breakfast interpretation is subjective. A staged or stylized post doesn't necessarily mean it's claiming to represent real-life expectations or demands. Social media content is often aspirational, aesthetic, or symbolic rather than literal. Third, the claims about estrangement from a father and access to grandchildren are part of a long-running, heavily contested family situation that has been publicly discussed in multiple versions. But even if parts of it are true, using it as a direct moral comparison, how can she talk about Father's Day? Is a rhetorical framing rather than a factual contradiction. Family dynamics don't operate as simple consistency tests. Finally, the section about charity visits, donors, and specific financial figures in Colombia is especially where narratives often become shaky. Those claims depend heavily on interpretation of events and selective sourcing, and they're frequently presented in commentary without full context or verification that what's happening overall in this passage is a stacking effect. Unrelated or loosely connected events are lined up to create a single conclusion of hypocrisy, even though each item has its own context, ambiguity, or dispute. When separated, the certainty of that conclusion becomes much less stable.
I mean, it's a very big deal, Lauren, for someone married to a royal to acknowledge publicly rumors of affairs. I mean, that's something that Prince Charles and Princess Diana didn't acknowledge for a very long time. Yet here is Meghan acknowledging those rumors as if it's some type of throwaway joke in an Instagram post. It's almost as if, Lauren, she is encouraging this speculation.
This part is presenting a specific claim about a promise linked to an Invictus Games visit and a financial figure, but it's important to separate what's verifiable from what's being asserted in commentary. There have been discussions in media coverage about royal or high-profile visits to countries being associated with hopes for future events, partnerships, or charitable visibility. However, claims like a promise that Invictus would come and a specific dollar amount like $11,000 are not automatically established facts unless they are backed by official statements, contracts, or clear reporting from reliable sources. In commentary videos like this, numbers and outcomes are often framed in a way that implies intent or wrongdoing without showing the underlying documentation, such as who made the promise, in what capacity, and whether it was actually binding or just. Informal expectation building around a visit. So what you're hearing here is another example of a narrative technique. A visit, an implied promise, a claimed shortfall, a moral conclusion. Each step depends on assumptions that may not be fully supported if you look at the primary sources. If you want, I can help you break down the whole script into what's factual versus what's interpretation, so you can see exactly where the argument is strong or weak.
Thanks to Dad, says the woman who cut her own father out of her life, denied him the chance to meet his son-in-law, and never allowed him to know his grandchildren. Now she wants to lecture the rest of us about celebrating Father's Day. The hypocrisy is staggering.
And
this segment mixes a few different ideas: event atmosphere, attendance, funding, and one specific match claim. But several of the conclusions being drawn here are not reliably supported as stated. First, on Invictus Games attendance and participation. The Invictus Games are a large, structured international sporting event for wounded, injured, and sick service personnel and veterans. Across editions, they typically involve hundreds of competitors and large support teams, plus families and volunteers. Numbers like 2,000 helpers or 1,500 family members may be attempts to describe the scale, but without an official breakdown, they're not something you can treat as precise or meaningful evidence of failure or imbalance. Second, the thin scatter of actual spectators framing is subjective. Attendance and crowd density vary by venue, sport, and scheduling. Some events are more attended than others, but picking a single impression and generalizing it to the whole games is not a solid assessment. Third, the claim about funding, much of it on the public purse, is often oversimplified in commentary. Hosting large international sporting events usually involves mixed funding. government support, sponsorships, charitable contributions, and host nation investment. Saying free food, free rooms, without context suggests impropriety, but hospitality arrangements for athletes, veterans, and families are standard for many multi-nation adaptive sports events. Finally, the wheelchair basketball story raises red flags. Invictus sports include elite-level adaptive athletes and military veterans with varying disabilities, and classification rules are strict. The idea that a team with no disabilities crushed the opposition and then casually revealed they could walk would be a major violation if true, and would have been widely documented and sanctioned. There's no solid evidence that this kind of scenario occurred as described, and it reads like an anecdote designed for shock value rather than a verified incident. Overall, this passage is doing what the earlier sections did, taking a real event, Invictus Games, and layering impressions, selective anecdotes, and unverified claims on top to create a narrative of disappointment or impropriety. When you strip those layers back, the factual core becomes much smaller and less dramatic than the commentary suggests.
In Colombia, the vice president who invited her, which is described in the book, was angry too because she expected the Sussexes to leave a large sum of money for charity, and they left, I think, something like $7,000 or $8,000. Yeah. I mean, pathetic for a drum set.
I mean, Meghan's literally wearing like a $7,000 shirt in one of her latest AI posts about Shop My Closet.
This passage is mostly a shift from describing the Invictus Games as an event to making claims about media attention and Meghan Markle's influence, but it blends observation, interpretation, and assumption in a way that's not clearly supported. First, the idea that Invictus became Meghan's show is a framing choice, not an objective fact. The Invictus Games are organized around wounded, injured, and sick service members, and the focus of official coverage and participation is the athletes. While high-profile attendees, including Harry and Meghan, do attract media attention, that doesn't replace or redefine the core purpose of the Games. Second, the claim that coverage vanished when she was not present oversimplifies how media cycles work. News attention around any large event fluctuates based on scheduling, major moments, and broader news competition. That doesn't necessarily indicate that interest was centered on one individual or that coverage depends on them being present. Third, the opening with a massive pop act and ceremonial moments are normal for international sporting events. Opening ceremonies often include entertainment and symbolic performances to engage audiences, not to shift focus away from participants. Finally, the idea that viewers were only tuning in to see what Meghan would do next is an assumption about audience motivation. Audience interest in public figures can be high, but it doesn't mean the entire event's value or coverage is defined by that. Overall, this is another example of narrative framing. Real elements of a public event are being combined with assumptions about intent and attention, then presented as a single explanation. When you separate the facts, event, attendance, ceremonies, media coverage, from the interpretation, whose show it was why coverage changed, the argument becomes much less definitive.
They did the same in their Nigerian tour. I think they gave $11,000 to some charity and, of course, promised that the Invictus Games would be in Nigeria, and they weren't, and that really annoyed the organizers. So they're not invited at any more royal tour.
A charity for wounded veterans orbiting one woman's brand. Pair that with the suspicion many of you keep raising that the Invictus books don't add up, talk of millions unaccounted for, and add a $7,000 shirt worn in front of people who've survived real violence. And you understand exactly why the anger runs this hot.
The wheelchair competition, which I watched, between America and Nigeria, the American team were professional coach team. And they all wheeled themselves onto the court, as did the Nigerians. None of the Americans had a physical disability. They all had all their limbs. They beat the Nigerians 24-0 because they were a professionally coached team. And then they wheeled themselves off into an adjoining area. Now, the 100 spectators in the 2,000 spectator auditorium didn't see what happened next, which I did. I looked over, and they all got up and walk away.
Here's the thing. Harry and Meghan's public choices will always be debated, but it's a big leap to turn that into predictions about what their children will feel in the future or to frame it as something taken from them in a fixed moral sense. Archie and Lilibet are still growing up in a private family setting, and what they understand about their background will come from a mix of family narratives, personal experience, and whatever level of public exposure their parents choose over time. It's not something outsiders can accurately forecast as a certainty. The idea that they've lost family, history, or relationships in a definitive way is also more of a narrative framing than a settled fact. Family relationships in public life are often complex, changing, and not fully visible to the public. People outside that circle don't actually see the full dynamics, only selective moments filtered through media coverage and commentary. So what this passage is doing is shifting from criticism of public behavior into speculation about the emotional future of children. That's where it becomes less about verifiable facts and more about interpretation. And that kind of projection is inherently uncertain.
Gets up, and Meghan immediately gets up and gives him a kiss in front of the cameras because it's Meghan's show. What is Meghan going to do? Well, on that occasion, they went up then to Whistler, and she then disappeared because she had a crisis over her copyright of her products.
American Riviera Orchard.
Exactly. And nobody covered the games anymore.
Meghan's literally wearing like a $7,000 shirt in one of her latest AI posts about Shop My Closet. I couldn't believe that she would wear such expensive clothes.
And always in front of impoverished
Yeah.
victims of terrible violence, totally tone deaf.
Belief so many of you hold is that the children are a leash that Meghan keeps them close and keeps them away because if they ever met their relatives, they might love them and want to go back. And then the contradiction that gives the whole game away. Harry called royal life a cage. He told Oprah it was like being trapped, like jail. So explain this. Why fight to keep the titles for his children? Why lock them into the very institution he says destroyed him?
The specialness of the royal family, the castles, the beautiful grounds, the beautiful homes, the beautiful jewels, the rich history, all of it is only going to become more and more appealing with time. And if I put myself in like a child's shoes who grows up and then learns many, many years later just how special their childhood could have been, and the fact that Harry and Meghan try to manipulate this as,
you can't call it a prison and then demand your kids inherit the cell. The clock's running on that too.
He compares his father and brother's life to being in jail or trapped in a cage when he talked to Oprah Winfrey. Then why would you set your child up for that by insisting they have a title?
Exactly.
William reportedly wants a leaner, more modern monarchy, and a streamlined institution may have little room for titles like Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet if they never take on any formal role within royal life.
we wouldn't have had any privacy if we had stayed with the royal family. Nonsense, okay? Absolute nonsense. There are members of the royal family whose children are not public figures, who aren't titled. There are members of the royal family who are not working royals and therefore are not followed around by paparazzi, and their children are not getting photographed all the time.
The titles get trimmed or stripped, and Harry becomes simply Mr. Harry Windsor. That's the time bomb.
Once the king departs, I think the new king, I mean Prince William, he wants to slim down and clean up the monarchy. He's talking about a modern monarchy. Well, a modern monarchy can't include Prince Archie, Princess Lilibet. They've got to remove the titles.
And the day Charles is gone, it starts counting down for real point one last thing, because it deserves burying. Someone floated the idea in a book, no less, that Meghan's treatment echoes in Boleyn's. Boleyn, accused, condemned, beheaded as a pawn in a vicious game she never started. You demolished it in seconds, and you were right. And Boleyn was a real political force, a woman caught in circumstance whose daughter grew up to become one of the greatest queens England ever had.
What you're really seeing at the moment, and that's so fascinating, is a couple in California who are floundering all over the place. They need money. Publicity, they think, will get them money. They're given publicity because we want to see how it all ends. What more will she do?
Well, I mean, there was this one. So we already got the Canadian tuxedo shot.
What more will she do to get? And what more can Harry do? Because he's down now to one charity. That's it now. Once every 2 years. And Meghan, I don't think, deserves to be compared to Anne Boleyn, because I mean, at least she was trying to be something more than just a third-rate actress.
Right.
Whereas Anne Boleyn was in the end a political force. She was someone rivaling the king. She wouldn't do what the king wanted, and the king was struggling. He needed to secure the Protestant succession. So the comparison is so foolish.
Meghan banished herself, quit, then monetized the fallout. The comparison isn't just wrong, it's an insult to and Boleyn.
Meghan doesn't fit in. Meghan never wants to assimilate. Meghan wants to be doing what she wants, and that is not compatible when you are in a royal family. This is, well, you know, why Catherine, Princess of Wales, is such an asset to this family. Many people feel that she's the favourite royal and everyone loves her, but there's never airs and graces about her at all. She is quite happy to slot into that hierarchy underneath King Charles, and she is very, very dutiful. And that's something that Meghan Markle could never get her head around. And Meghan had the world at her feet, and she was the one that ruined it.
So that's where it really stands. The flight's weeks away, the security situation is still unsettled, and his own side is muddying the story. The only question left is how low this goes before it finally blows. The videos on screen pick up right where this leaves off. Tap 1 and keep watching.